April. We're now joined by Jon Cooper, Ourlad's guide to the NFL draft. He's been with us on Wednesdays and will take us up to the week of the draft. We appreciate his knowledge and insight. Jon, thanks for your time again today. So you have been looking at the mid-round, perhaps those who are under the radar or maybe not getting enough love on the offensive end. Let's start with quarterback. Is there anybody on that list?
A whole bunch. After the first five, there's a drop-off for sure. But there's some guys in the mid-round that have what we call redeeming qualities, things that they can do well. The number one guy in that group for me is Aiden O'Connell of Purdue. He's got a strong arm. He goes through read progressions in an NFL-style offense. He's got some holes for sure. He's not the most mobile player in the world. He can escape, but it's not something that, he's going to make a living on. He's a good passer, but he will force the ball. So that's something they're going to have to break him a little bit of that gunslinger. But he's had some great games, and I think he's a guy that, is going to be ready to be a quality backup right off the bat. And that's probably where he's going to be, at least initially. But all you got to do is take a look at Brock Purdy last year and see that sometimes these late round guys end up being, or mid to late round, end up being your guy. And he would be a good one to have on your team in case you need that. There's some other ones too. Stetson Bennett's a proven winner at quarterback. Undersized, underrated. He just makes plays. And so there's a spot for him as a backup on a team. And you can go on down the line. There's a whole bunch of quarterbacks that we could talk about. We could do a whole show on just that position as far as what some of these mid-round guys might bring to the table.
Well, Jon, let me ask you about a couple more because we cover, the Big 12 quite a bit, and there's a couple of teams that are making their way in, but they'll be, breaking in new quarterbacks. That's BYU and Houston. Houston loses Clayton Tune. BYU loses Jaron Hall. Any thoughts on either of those two guys?
Well, they're both solid players. Hall, is a strong arm, good, and he's decent athletic ability. He's got some issues, in terms of consistency, but, plays in the offense, that throws the football. And Tune at Houston is a guy that, we think is probably about the 10th. Those two guys are both in the same mode, maybe a little bit of a drop-off from some of the other ones. But Max Duggan would be a little bit below them, but in terms of how they're ranked. But Tune played in an offense that allowed him to display his passing talent. He's got some mobility, definitely, and he's a guy that a team is going to look at, like we're talking about, as a quality backup who could develop into something more.
Is Hendon Hooker in your top five of quarterbacks available?
Yes, he's number 5 right now, but I'll be honest with you, if he didn't have an ACL after what I saw of him early in the season last year, he might be number 3.
Okay.
I personally really like him, but I understand with the ACL, you don't know for sure. He could still sneak back into the first round, but it's more likely that he's a second-round pick.
All right, let's go to running back. I know that there's one, maybe two in the first round with Bijan. And then, Jahmyr Gibbs at Alabama. Who is next in line, in your opinion?
Well, there's a whole bunch of them you could say are next in line. Shane from Texas A&M. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Shane. Yeah.
Shane. Okay,
yeah.
Close. But, so there's a bunch of guys that could fall into that area. Just going down a little bit lower maybe than some of the guys that are all bunched up like Charbonneau and a few like that. There's a guy that I really like. It's Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina. Small stature back. He's got blazing speed and a very unique agility in traffic. He's small, but he's awfully tough to tackle in the open field. Excellent stop-start quickness, explosive, finds that crease. They gave him an awful lot of work at East Carolina. But he's more than a third down back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield for sure. And he's going to make a quality addition to somebody's running back room, in our opinion, even though he might be a third or fourth round or even later pick. You just don't know how these teams are going to value running backs. And there's an undersized guy that I like too, Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State. He's the shortest player in the draft at 5'5" and 179 pounds, but he's pretty hard to find in traffic as a result. He avoids tackles and makes play out of nothing. And he's a very good receiver with a good catch radius. So those two guys that have been on my mind, this past week is guys I'm very interested to see where they fall in the draft.
John, wide receiver wise, this is a class that's like that feels like the grades are moving, or at least people think maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba is the only like true first round guy that'll be on most boards, and other guys kind of slipping in to the second rounds. But there are guys like Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss that seem to be getting some bump up the boards, and maybe like Rashee Rice. Who do you like at wide receiver in the mid rounds?
Well, what I'd really like to know is where all this comes from. Because when I look at film on guys, Smith, the kid from Ohio State, yeah, he's great. He was hurt this year. He probably is the best receiver in this draft. Coming off an injury, you don't know. I mean, why is Quentin Johnson falling so far in people's eyes all of a sudden, in pundits' eyes? Where are they getting their information? That's what I would love to know, because every NFL team has a different view in their room, and it's very possible he's the first guy that goes still. You know what I mean? So, I guess I just don't know. They haven't changed. They're still the same player they were that we were looking at 2 months ago. Nothing's changed. So I don't know what makes guys go up and down the board. We don't fluctuate as much, I guess. But anyway, some of those mid-round guys that you're talking about, my favorite is Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. He's probably our 17th rated receiver, but extremely productive player. In a year that has not necessarily got a great receiver class, but some depth, he's a guy that has been so productive. You just can't ignore that production. He's got good height. He's tough. He runs after the catch. He breaks tackles, and he gets open. He's not a burner. He's not going to blow you off the field, and he's not going to run deep, and you're not going to throw a lot of, long bombs to him. But he's going to be a quality number 2 receiver for a long time, in our opinion. And, he may not go till the middle of the 5th round, but, we think it's more like the 4th, maybe even the 3rd. Just depends on how people view and value a guy like that. Everybody's looking for a tall blazer with great agility. There's just not that many of those guys out there. So, you got to take what you can get, and you got to take guys that are players.
I think Xavier Hutchinson is a heck of a note, an example of value. Could end up being a long-term pro, catch a ton of passes. The only thing I remember about him, and is it unfair, is a couple of the times, especially last year, he had a couple of key drops in a game. How much does that work against him?
Well, it's, it's not good, but 2 drops or 3 drops or whatever it is, among a whole, you got to take a look at the whole body of work.
Sure.
He's very productive. A couple of key drops in a game versus 3 quality years of production. I think I'll take that production.
All right. Again, Jon Cooper, Ourlad's Guide to the NFL Draft, with us on 365 Sports.
John, I think a couple weeks ago we mentioned the tight ends and that there's kind of top heavy, but there's a couple guys in the middle rounds too that could make some waves too. Do you like? I guess it would be Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion is maybe the best middle round guy, or am I leaving somebody out there?
Well, yeah, Kuntz. Ironically, that was a guy that I talked about on another show, and he is 6'7". And, and he's got a catch radius that, because of it, is outstanding, with also excellent body control to go with it. He's not a great run blocker. He's got good agility so he can get out and block in space, but, in line, he's not real good right now at this point. So, he's going to be that kind of, what if I'm a defensive coordinator playing against this kid, you put him out in that flexed tight end position, almost like a slot receiver, matchup nightmare. So, yes, for that reason alone, he's going to be a guy that he might go a little higher than what I thought originally. We kind of had him down, and if you look at our book, yeah, he's a little down the line there a little bit, but I'm not so sure someone's not going to say, hey, matchup nightmare. And he got good hands, too. So, he's one we like. A guy that, is a little bit different, from that perspective that we like a lot is Will Mallory from Miami. He would be kind of like the Xavier Hutchinson of the tight end group. He's just productive. Ironically, they're from the same hometown, even different schools. But, Mallory is a little bit undersized, for a tight end, at 6'4", 250. But he runs really well. He gets open, great route runner, excellent hands. And he's a try-hard blocker that will always give you a good effort, and he'll play in line, and he's not going to hurt you. So he's a potential two-way tight end that we'd like to see him be a little bigger, a little bit more bulk, but he's a solid receiver. And, he's going to go, in that mid-round area, 4th, 5th round probably. But, if you watched him at the Senior Bowl, he looked very good to us, and we like him.
Was he maybe hurt a little bit by the fact that Miami had such quarterback flux this year that his game tape is probably going to be lacking because they were just bad on that side of the ball?
Yeah. I've always liked him. I've always felt he was a good player, and you didn't see much of that this year. But when you got him in the Senior Bowl. He was, I think he caught 6 balls in the game, and he looked great in the practices. So, that has to weigh in too.
John, so much talk about Bijan, but what have you thought about any talk surrounding his counterpart there in the Texas backfield and Roschon Johnson?
Nice player. He's going to be down the line a little bit. He didn't get the exposure, obviously, that Bijan did. But, he's a nice player. He's got some power. He's not quite as fast, I don't think, but he's got some skills. And teams need running backs. They don't need just one. And so down the line, he's going to get drafted. And he's got a good shot to make a team, I think.
He's a big physical. He played quarterback. Does it help at all that he transitioned from what he originally was going to be to what he became?
I don't know, if that helps him or not, as far as that goes, because the two positions are so different. And if you look at the way he plays, he's that physical presence. He likes to run over people. What is he, 6 foot? He's 225, and he's not, he's not a burner as far as speed is concerned. He's decent. And he's not what you would call a graceful runner, but he can run through tackles, and you always want a guy like that. The run through a brick wall type running back, and so he's gonna get drafted, as I said, late. It could be the 5th, could be the 6th, could be the 7th. He's going to be drafted somewhere in that area, and he's going to be a part of a backfield room next year in 2023.
Because of his style, then he would be one of those running back by committee that you get to when the other guy needs a breather, and he could wear people down if they're already worn down?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the way I definitely see him.
Yeah.
As that type of back. In some ways, that's the role he played at Texas.
John, who is the guy that no one talks about the most, or that kind of under the radar the most so far, that you think is just a super stud that nobody's noticed?
Well, the running back from East Carolina would be, on my list. Yeah, Keaton Mitchell. He'd be on my list. I get one of those every year. My linebacker, Malcolm Rodriguez, was my guy last year for that role. And I was just shocked that he went in the 6th round. But I guess analytics will kill you. And that is what I think is hurting, might hurt Keaton Mitchell a little bit. But, boy, I got to just turn the tape on, in my opinion. And, this kid's a player. But that would be the one, right off the top of my head that I would say I think is really good that's not getting the play. We've had disagreement in our group of scouts at Ourlad that, over his ability and where he fits. But, he's all you got to do is look at the workload he had. But anyway, there's other guys too. I mean, Aiden O'Connell is a guy. Hutchinson, in some ways, I don't hear anything about Hutchinson, the receiver. I mean, so I've kind of mentioned, some of those guys. And on defense, there's a few too we could get into, but it's going to be an interesting draft. I think the draft is full of surprises, in terms of where guys go. It happens every year.
You mentioned Aiden O'Connell, the Purdue quarterback. I remember watching them play a couple of different times. And the receiver, I've gone blank on his. Is it Rogers? What's the name of the receiver?
Charlie Jones.
Charlie Jones just seems to be a baller. I don't know his size. I don't really know. I just know that the guy made almost every catch and was also very tough doing it, and a lot of those catches over the middle.
Yeah, and Aiden did a nice job with him. Those two guys were really on the same page. As far as, in fact, there's a guy we could talk about as being maybe under the radar a little bit more than he should be, as a receiver. I should have mentioned him because he is highly productive. And he can go up and get the ball. He's got a nice catch radius.
Mm-hmm.
He, again, like Hutchinson, highly productive. And the other thing that he's got going for him that, his negative would be, he's just under 6 feet tall and he's a little bit slight in build, but he can run. You know what I mean? He's fast. That's the other thing. He's got something going for him that Hutchinson doesn't. He can really run and he can get open underneath, as well. I mean, he could improve route running somewhat, but, when he transferred from Iowa, he really became, something special. And I think like you said, he's under the radar.
Yeah, I do. How much lying goes on the next couple of weeks when people talk about the draft?
Well, an old NFL general manager once told me, years ago, as they were getting ready for the draft, he said, listen to everything, believe about a third of it.
Okay. All right.
So, maybe even half, maybe up to half. But because, there's a lot of stuff that's, I guess, thrown out there. I wasn't aware of anything. In fact, he didn't tell me where it's coming from. But, there's always going to be guys that, are, like to talk, pundits, things like that. And I'm sure there's, I heard rumors that, that they like to set. There was a certain draft analyst years ago that scouts and general managers like to try to set him up with information just for fun that was completely false.
Just for fun. Oh my God.
And that's just something I was told by, there's a lot of scout stories, out there but that's one that I was told, go ahead.
No, how's Dan Shanka doing? I know we spoke with him. I know he's going through a lot of physical therapy. How's he doing?
He's doing better. He's a fighter. I mean, he's had that left side is still a struggle, but he goes to exercise class every day. He gets physical therapy like 4 or 5 times a week, and he's very religious about doing it. So he's gotten stronger. He's still not quite able to. His speech is really good. He calls me and we have some great conversations. He's kind of overseeing things right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as what we do, he can't really, write a report anymore, but he can read it and he can, make comments on players. I'll get a text from him. He does Siri texts. And so I'll get a text from him about a guy every now and then. What do you think of this tight end? What do you think of that, that happened? And tells me, don't forget about this quarterback. Don't forget about that guy and stuff like that. And so, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I had a great long conversation with him yesterday and got off the phone just feeling great.
That's awesome. Please tell him we said hi. He's been on shows that I've done for probably 20-something years or whenever you guys started. And we wish him the best of luck. And also, John, we appreciate you. Hope to talk to you again next week.
You bet.
Thanks
a lot. Appreciate it.
Jon Cooper, Ourlad's scouting service, Ourlad's guide to the NFL draft. We appreciate his time. By the way,